My name is Cheryl. I'm 69 years old. I live in Charleston. Now, I can instead of why I will count up 60 to the Canada, South Carolina, and I carry a story that many people couldn't stand standing up. Now tell me, what would you do if all of a sudden your own daughter decided to erase who you are, as if it were possible to sell your story along with the walls of your house? Maybe you've felt that too. That feeling that the world moved too fast and forgot who built the floor. That everything you held with love, the family, the home, the sacrifices, became just a detail in any contract. And the worst, made by the one you loved the most. Today, now show I had well, later see show, come the and show. I'm going to tell you how I went from the living room chair to the bench of a courtroom. How a woman no one looked twice at made a judge freeze in silence. Because in that room, how, that day, everyone found out who I really was. Not everything in life needs a shout. Sometimes silence has the weight of a sentence. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. That day, when I entered the courtroom, no one looked at me twice. An ordinary lady, white hair tied up carefully, flat shoes, steady hands, and calm expression. But when the judge saw me, he froze. He stopped in the middle of the sentence, took off his glasses, and was silent. It was as if I had seen a ghost. No one there knew who I was, and by the time they found out, it was too late. What happened in that room changed the fate of everyone present, and turned upside down the story they thought they were writing. If you've ever felt that you've been erased, if you've been called exaggerated, if you've ever been silent just so you don't make things worse. So, this story is also yours. And before I open this painful chapter of my life, I wanted to ask you something from the bottom of my heart. If you can, leave a like here on the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me until the end. Sometimes all we need is to know that there is someone listening on the other side. And today, I need you to listen to me, because my time has come to speak. My life has always been made up of small rituals. I woke up before the sun, put water to boil, and served my black coffee in the same porcelain mug I bought when I was still a girl, the one with the golden edges and pale blue flowers. Then I'd put on my flat shoes, grab my thick fabric echo bag, and walk to the farmer's market on King Street. He knew the name of each salesman. George separated the sweetest apples from me. Nanny Nordau, a harsti ashtoba golda. Lillian always kept a handful of fresh herbs all to myself. It was my moment with the city, with the world that still made sense. In the afternoon, I liked to sit in the armchair in the living room, the same one where Walter read the newspaper on Sundays, and go through my boxes of memories. I labeled everything. Christmas, 1983, wide, one broad outcome. Kimberly, first recital, und trip to Asheville. In each envelope, noun, a living memory. Sometimes I laughed to myself with an old photograph. Other times, he would stop for long minutes with a letter in his hands, feeling that thick silence that only those who have lost it understand. The house was too big for the noise. I couldn't hear any more. I remember the first time I saw Walter. It was my second month as an administrative assistant at the Charleston Municipal Courthouse. He arrived with that light suit, impeccable hair, and a leather briefcase tight against his chest. He, the defense lawyer, new to there, and seemed a little lost among the piles of paper. I smiled at him. He smiled back, and there it all began. We dated discreetly, as was customary at the time. Le diable, or l'agua, ademus. We married simple, loud, in a small church near Battery. He was the one who planted the azaleas in the backyard. He said white flowers symbolized peace. For 42 years, Walter was my ground. The house, our base. Everything we built was with sacrifice. When he fell ill, I spent my nights at the hospital bedside. One shall be used, or telling stories from our youth to distract him from the pain. And when he left, it was as if half the house had gone with him. Kimberly was our greatest pride. Non, a curious, intelligent girl, full of questions. He studied in a private school. She took violin lessons, ballet lessons, did an exchange program in California when she didn't even know how to fold her own clothes. Every penny we had, we invested in it, and it never hurt me. On the contrary, I said to Walter, she's going to be a brilliant woman. Well, there will be opportunities that we didn't have, and for a long time. I believed that, but everything started to change after she met Ethan, a real estate agent with teeth that were too white and eyes that never smiled. At first, he was cordial, but it didn't take long for his presence to suffocate the spaces of our relationship. He decided where they were going to spend the holidays, what she could or could not eat, and nouns. Little by little, he began to interfere in our conversations as well. Kimberly no longer called me often. When she came to visit me, she was always in a hurry, and over time stopped coming. I pretended I couldn't see. He set the table every Sunday. The napkin with her lilac embroidery was still on the right side of the plate, as it always was. But the cutlery did not move. The coffee was cooling, and I ate alone. Looking at the door as if still waiting. Sometimes I thought about calling, but my voice trembled, just imagining the distant tone on the other end of the line. And you know what hurt the most? It was not silence. It was the fact that, even so, I continued to love. She continued to prepare her favorite pie. He kept sorting out the magazines he thought she would like. I still thought that, maybe next Sunday, she would come back. I tell you something from the bottom of my heart. There is no greater loneliness than knowing that the person you raised with love now prefers to avoid you, and not out of hurt, not out of quarrel, but out of convenience, as if you had become a burden, as if it were a memory too old to fit in her new life. Emotional pause. Sometimes I found myself thinking, how many mothers are living this in silence? Like me, how many have left everything for someone and are now treated as if they were invisible within their own history? If this has ever happened to you, if this pain has touched you at some point in your life, write here in the comments a simple phrase. In your own way. It can be, I believe. I've lived it. What strength, or just it touched me. Because sometimes all we need is to know that we are not alone in this pain. Even with all this, I kept going. Wow. Every morning, a routine. Each afternoon, a memory. Until the scam came that I didn't expect. The day Kimberly walked through the door, not to visit me, but to offer me a way out. But it wasn't a visit. It was a proposal. And there, I realized something much worse was to come. Kimberly showed up on a rainy Wednesday, without warning, without flowers, without hugs. He carried a black zippered briefcase and a tense smile, one of those that don't touch the eyes. No. I sat down at the table, as I always did when she came, and served chamomile tea, although she didn't even touch the cup. Then, Mom, we need to talk, she said. In a most professional voice. I thought it was something about her health, or maybe a problem at work. But no, it was about me, or rather, about my house. Ethan and I think it might be time for you to consider a more practical life, a smaller place, more comfortable, a senior community in Jacksonville. I didn't say anything, not because I agreed, but because sometimes silence is the only defense we have. She continued talking, mentioning safety, power, accessibility, quality of life, all packed in beautiful words. But what I heard was something else. We don't have any more room for you. That's it. That hurt more than any absence. In the following days, she did not call. He did not return. Only one letter arrived in the mail. The bank envelope was folded in half. Inside, a notification stating that a power of attorney had been registered in Ethan's name to handle legal matters related to my home. They said that I had verbally consented. I consented? I never did. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody explained anything to me. I felt my heart tighten, as if an invisible hand was crushing it. I walked around the house, trying to understand. No. Each door had this done. Each photo, each piece of furniture had my story. And now someone thought they could pluck me out of here with office words? Ethan started to appear more, always without Kimberly. He came with his tablet. No, Wilcown. Took pictures of the rooms, measured walls with a laser tape measure, and said phrases like, why didn't, and short phrases like, it's just an informal evaluation. Mrs. Cheryl? Nothing definitive. She called me Mrs. Cheryl as if she were not my son-in-law. As if I were a stranger who needed to be treated with formality. Sometimes he came with brokers. Now, young, hurried, too smiling. This natural light is great. A house with potential. No, they said, until Kyle, as if I were not there, as if I were an old piece of furniture to be vacated. On Thanksgiving, I spent the morning getting everything ready. I had hope. The potatoes, the filling, the cranberry sauce made just the way Walter liked it. The turkey had been seasoned since the night before. At 11 a.m., I sent a message asking what time they would arrive. At 11:37 a.m. And I received the answer. Wow. Mom, we decided to do something just between us this year. I hope you understand. Happy Thanksgiving. I put my cell phone away. I turned off the oven. I wrapped the turkey in foil and put it in the freezer. I sat down at the table, and I ate alone. That was the first year since Kimberly was born that I spent the date without her. And yet, I arranged her plate, and the lilac napkin was also there. The worst loneliness is not being alone. It is to be forgotten by the one you carried in your arms. After that, I stopped trying to understand. I began to observe. How small signs began to accumulate. The cold tone of the conversations, the decisions already taken, visits without invitation. No, one day, I walked into the living room and found Ethan measuring the space on the bookshelf. We are thinking of opening up this environment here, maybe tearing down this wall. I asked, "Who are we?" "Ethan?" He pretended not to hear. It was there that I realized. They were erasing me, gradually, without shouting, without pushing. They were removing me from my own history, with the delicacy of someone who removes an old painting from the wall. But in more than a portrait, in the whole house. And it was at that moment, in the face of Ethan's silent arrogance, that something inside me began to move. It was still subtle, like embers under the ashes, but it was real. I wonder to this day, did they think I didn't see it? That I didn't feel? That I was just a frail old woman, sitting on souvenirs and hot tea? They were wrong. Now, very wrong. Because there, without them knowing how, I started to pay attention, and everything they thought they were doing in silence. I was writing down with my eyes, and that's how the story began to change. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all these years of life, it's that those who build in silence, he also learns to defend himself in silence. But how exactly did I start to turn this game around? That's what you'll understand in the next part, because the worst was yet to come, and I gave. No one expected it. It was a cold Sunday in January, one of those that freeze your bones before you even open the door. I had prepared apple cake with cinnamon, as I did every first Sunday of the year. The smell invaded the kitchen and warmed the empty house, even though no one else came to taste it. But that day, Kimberly came. She arrived alone, unannounced, wearing an elegant coat that I had never seen before. He sat down at the table in the hurry of someone who wants to get rid of what he came to do. She took a beige envelope from her bag and placed it on the crochet towel as if it were just another paper. "Mom, this is for your good." she said. Lyle. I stared at the envelope as if facing a knife. I opened slowly. It was an offer to sell my house, signed by Ethan, with the formalities all ready to move me to a senior community in Jacksonville, a place that I never saw, never asked for, and didn't even know where it was, right? It's a beautiful, safe condominium. Well, with activities for their age. There are people in your age group. You will adapt, she continued. Wow. As if trying to sell a used car. I tried to take a deep breath. I asked if this was a decision or suggestion. And then came the phrase that broke me in two. You can no longer take care of everything by yourself. That's a lot of space. And the house needs maintenance. We are taking this responsibility. We, as if she and Ethan now owned me. I looked at her, and what hurt the most was not the paper, nor the proposal, nor the hidden plan. What hurt me the most was the absence of doubt on my daughter's face, the certainty of those who had already decided, as if I were just a problem to be solved. What emotionally? A box to be packaged and shipped. Kimberly spoke of care, no, but there was no affection. He spoke of practicality, but there was no listening. I tried to argue, to say that I still had conditions, that house was my story, that every corner there had a piece of her father. My love, no, her childhood, Nilma, our now. But before I finished, she raised her hand. Mom, don't make it harder than it needs to be. The decision has already been made. It was there that everything changed inside me. For the first time, I felt that I was no longer a person to her. I was a pending matter, a number, a signature. My body was sitting at the table, but my voice, this one, no longer existed. Kimberly stood up, took the envelope back, and said she was going to wait for my review. She called what was actually surrender a revision, and he walked out the door as if he had left a travel catalog, not a sentence. I stood there, intent, motionless, listening to the sound of the car's engine disappearing into the street. The smell of apple cake was still in the air, and for the first time, it made me sick. I walked slowly to the bedroom, took the envelope off the table and placed it inside the drawer of the nightstand. I didn't tear it up. I didn't sign. I didn't cry. But something inside me broke. It wasn't anger. It was a kind of grief that I had never felt before. A living mourning. Me, there, one, whence, on their self-hand, feeling my daughter bury me alive. The truth is that on that day, I died a little, but not all grief is the end, because even in the darkness of that enforced silence, there was a spark. I still didn't know how, but I began to understand that my answer would not come in words. It would come in steps, and the first of them was to open the right drawer, because there was something there that they had forgotten how. And when I found it, everything started to change. Want to know what it was? So stay with me, because the story is just beginning. They began to dismantle my life like someone dismantling an old shop window, with cold gloves, quick gestures, and no care. Ethan came almost every day now. Sometimes he didn't even ring the bell. He entered with that hurried walk, cell phone in hand, on the aisle, talking to brokers as if he were selling any piece of land. He photographed the rooms, wrote down measurements, talked about renovation potential out loud, even with my belongings still there. I sat in the armchair in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper I no longer read, while I listened to my story being reduced to square meters. There was a day when he brought an evaluator, a young, arrogant young man, who dragged his feet through the rooms as if he were entering a store, not a living house. He ran his fingers over the shelves of the bookshelf where Walter's books were, played the piano as if checking the state of a museum piece. I wanted to scream, but no scream would come out of there, because what hurt the most was not the touch. It was no how young was the contempt. Kimberly came less often, but when she did, came in a hurry. He started packing my books without asking. She took photo frames with photos of her christening, of our trip to Atlanta, and put them inside boxes with moving tacks, as if I wasn't there, as if I had stopped being the owner. Wow. One day, I went to my bedroom to put some clothes away and noticed a box near the door. My wedding dress was tucked in there, next to a pair of shoes, ID kept since prom. On top, written in red marker, wow, donation. The ring Walter gave me, the one he bought in installments and handed me with trembling hands, was gone from my dresser. When I asked Kimberly, she replied without looking me in the eye, wow, it must have been kept with the other objects. We are organizing. Mom, it's for your good. For my sake. They said it as if repeating a mantra. But what is this good that erases someone's history without asking permission? What is this care that tears the soul out of the house and calls it a new beginning? That night, I sat on the old sofa in the living room, the one where Walter used to play the guitar on Saturday nights. He played slowly, out of tune at times, but it was real music. Music that filled everything. Now, there was only silence, a cutting, adinanjom, midagwas, hachakadil, chukasigrafos daki, and dry silence, full of absence. The house was whole. Lin, I sendunam, shupikam. I started to see her, but now so not true. But everything that made sense in her had already been taken away. And then I cried. I cried like I hadn't done in years. I cried for what I lost. Now, until Peter said, I cried for what I lost. Yes, but mostly, no, don't tell. I cried for everything I missed, for all the times I lowered my head, that I accepted crumbs in the name of peace, that I kept quiet so as not to hurt, not to be called dramatic, so as not to push away even more. I cried because I was treated like a nuisance. What? Why? And then you, she said, as a thing. And the biggest pain, it was realizing that I didn't even have the strength to complain anymore. I, who was the base of this family, I, who carried groceries, who stayed up all night taking care of a fever, who worked for 3 to pay for my daughter's school. Now it was just a body on the couch, an obstacle in front of a real estate project. If you're still there listening to me, on the other side of this screen, I want to thank you. I'm here, opening my heart, no, telling things that for a long time were only inside me. And if this story's touching you in any way, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes a listening heart makes us breathe better. And I still have a lot to tell you, because that night, Mom, I almost gave up. No, almost. But it was in this almost that something different began to be born. Because when we have nothing left, we discover what we really carry inside. And what I found there, it was stronger than anything they had tried to take away from me. But you'll understand exactly what I did when he knows what was hidden at the bottom of that drawer. That same night, after the crying dried on my face and fatigue pushed me to the bedroom, something stopped me from lying down. It was not fear. It was a restlessness, as if there was a whispering voice that I needed to search. Dust off what had been stored for too long. I walked to Walter's old office, that little room next to the laundry room where he spent hours with his law books piled up, his notes scattered and his battery radio playing jazz quietly. The room had been the same way for years. Nobody touched it. It was as if he was still going to come back to finish it. I started by opening the drawers of the desk. We receive old ones, folders with the names of old customers, invoices yellowed by time, almost everything useless. But when I bent down to clean the back of the bookshelf, where the older books were, something made a noise, a dry touch of wood against wood. I pulled out the case law copies and found a small, rectangular, dark wooden box, locked. The key, thank God, was taped to the bottom. My fingers trembled as I fitted the key. I opened slowly, and there, life has turned. Wow. Inside the box, I found documents that seemed dormant in time, but still alive with value. There were receipts, certificates, deeds, a contract to purchase a lot in Mount Pleasant, in Walter's name, is transferred to me. An envelope from the bank indicating investments in stocks from the time he worked as a legal advisor. An extract from an application fund with my full name on it. I never knew he had done all that. Walter was always a man, silent in words, but noisy in gestures. And there, at the bottom of the box, was a white envelope with my favorite handwriting. It was his. The letter is firm, precise. Cheryl, known, my daddy, was Cheryl Tabka. If you're reading this, it's because time has passed, and maybe you need something more than souvenirs. I left everything in his name, because I know that the world won't always treat you with the respect you deserve. But the papers here will give you back your voice. Never forget, silence can be resistance, but it can also be justice. I took a deep breath. I read the letter more than once. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But something inside me has shifted. I also found the will, dated, registered. notarized. Ah, Walter named me as the sole heir, with explicit clauses. Nothing could be moved, sold, near Nordstigergan, or transferred without my written consent. No verbal power of attorney, no family interpretation could invalidate that. What's more, it you said, that don't talk about. In the middle of the contracts, there was a document that made me sit on the floor without air. One a lease for office building in downtown Charleston. In my name, a building, entire, there, that I didn't even know existed. Wow. She had been there for 2 years, living like a burden, being treated like a limited and vulnerable lady, when in fact I owned a property valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rich? Rich? I don't know if I would use that word, but abandoned, incapable, forgotten. No, no more. I felt my hands steady again. The silence, which was once empty, went out, was now full of strength. I got up from the ground as if I were finding my legs again after a long time of sitting. I went to the living room. I turned on all the lights. The house looked different for the first time in a long time. She seemed to look back at me, as if to say, now, yes, Cheryl. That night changed everything. I didn't have to talk to anyone. I didn't have to raise my voice. I just had to open a box that was there all along, and to understand that what I was looking for, it was already mine. The question now was, what to do with all that? Because justice, we don't ask, we build. And what I started to build that morning, no one else would be able to knock it down. But the first name I wrote on paper, it was that of a lawyer, Nancy Jitopel. Want to know who he was? Oh, that part you need to hear, because when he saw me coming into the office, he froze. The next day, I put on my best navy blue blouse, the one Walter said matched my eyes, and headed to downtown Charleston. It wasn't raining, but the sky was heavy, as if it carried with me everything I had been swallowing for months. I walked into an inconspicuous office on the corner of Broad Street and Church. The sign read, Bentley and Associates, and inside, sitting behind an antique wooden table, was Mark Bentley. We hadn't seen each other for more than 20 years. He was a prosecutor at the time when I was still typing minutes and organizing files in the corridors of the court. When he saw me, he stood up with a surprised smile. Lord, wow, Cheryl, oh my, how long? What can I help you with? I sat calmly. When his usage didn't so calm. I took the papers out of my purse, the contracts, the will, the bank statements, the registration of the building in my name. I spread everything on the table as if showing an old map. Mark read it carefully, line by line. His face was changing. First, surprise, then Leo, indignation. Finally, respect. You have everything here. This house is yours. No one can sell it without your authorization. And this building downtown, Cheryl, Do you know what that's worth today? I nodded slowly. No. No, I didn't know. And, in a way, I didn't care. Because what was at stake was not money. It was dignity. And by it so called, I would not miss you ignore. Mark sighed deeply and looked at me with that serious way that only righteous men have. Do you want to sue them? I took a slow breath before answering. No, I don't want revenge. Mark, I want protection. I want security. I want them to stop deciding for me as if I weren't alive. Well, he nodded. My own, seal dial, Wantanchio. So, we are going to freeze the assets. File an injunction preventing any transaction until everything is clarified. And, well, if necessary, convene a hearing. But it will have to be subtle. You want to keep calm, right? Always, I replied. They think I'm weak, but you can't imagine what I'm about to do. And there, wow, with a firm pen, I signed the first documents that would begin the turning point of my story. Mark went even further. How? He opened a system on the computer, entered some data, winds down, cross-referenced records, and then he smiled. Did you know that the building that is in your name, the one on Calhoun Street, has had tenants for years, including Kimberly and Ethan? My eyes widened. What do you mean? He turned the screen. They rent one of the units. The rent money is deposited directly into the fund account registered in your name. The account you didn't know existed. I leaned back in my chair, unable to say anything for a few seconds. They lived in my building. They paid rent to me without knowing it. And yet, they treated me like a burden, a dependent, a lady who needed to be allocated like an old piece of furniture. The world has these ironies that we only understand after 60, when we realize that life may seem confusing, but time always finds a way to organize the pieces. Mark, I want this all to be recorded. If they try to sell my house again, I want there to be legal consequences. And if I decide to act, I want to be supported. He agreed. You're done. I left the office with the papers in my bag and my feet on the ground as I hadn't felt in a long time. It was not courage. It was consciousness. It was knowing that, even if I was silent, I had power, and that the day has come to use it. If you've come this far with me, I'll tell you one thing from the bottom of my heart. Keep going, because what's about to happen, not even I expected it. You know that moment when the tables turn and no one notices? That's right. It's coming, Moa. And it will happen in a place where no one would ever imagine. Inside a courtroom. And the judge. The judge will freeze when he sees me. But that, I'll tell you later. Letter.how. The letter arrived on a Friday, folded in three. I know, like Stacey not, and she can tell what, with the seal of the Charleston courthouse in the corner. When I saw the envelope in the mailbox, my heart didn't race. Curiously, he stayed calm. I opened it right there. Now, standing, with my feet firmly on the sidewalk, and my eyes already prepared for what was coming. It was an official summons. Appear in court on the 12th, Nunanessa, now, at 9 a.m. for a hearing to contest the sale of the property, signed by a judge I knew by name. Not personally, but it was him. It was real. Kimberly and Ethan had filed a formal lawsuit. They claimed that the house was already in the process of being sold, and that I, due to cognitive and emotional difficulties, could no longer manage my own assets. They said that they had signed for me as legal representatives. Voluntary act of the mother, based on mental fragility. That's how they wrote. I named it pure coldness. They wanted to declare me incapable. No, legally, morally, humanly, well done. They assume pain. Oh, they wanted to erase me once and for all, and this time, with a stamp and notarized signature. Wow. I closed the envelope. I went back inside the house and went straight to my bag. I took the folder I prepared with Mark. I organized the documents in order: original will, records of assets, bank statements, the deed to the building, and finally, a copy of Walter's letter. When each page was a proof, yes, but for me, they were pieces of my history, and more than papers. I took memory, allegiance, silence that resisted. Deep down, what I really wanted was not to win a dispute. It was to be heard, nuanced, was, and respected. On the eve of the hearing, I made a longer tea. I chose a lilac dress that had been stored for years. Funny how certain clothes seem to keep the strength of the woman we were. I put my ring on my finger. One Nadesto, Noan. The one Ethan thought he could hide. I put on lipstick, the same shade I wore at Kimberly's wedding. It wasn't to impress. It was to remind myself of who I still was. I slept early for the first time in months. I slept in one piece, without fear, no tears, knowing that the next day, until new self-guitars, I would no longer be hiding inside my own home. I woke up to blue skies, the kind of sky that Walter said was a sign of truth coming to the surface. I drank my coffee, arranged the documents in my bag, and sat for a few minutes on the porch. I saw the azaleas swaying in the wind, as if wishing me good luck, and then I left. There's one thing that life teaches us when we get older. Dignity is not proven by shouting. It shows itself in the firmness of the steps, in the clarity of the eyes, in the decision to move forward even after everything. And that day, that's exactly what I took with me. It was not just an audience. It was my moment to look into the eyes of those who tried to erase me and show that I was still whole. Emotional pause. It's funny. Sometimes life turns us inside out, but that's the only way we discover what's really sewn inside. And if you've ever been in a situation where they tried to silence you, diminish you, take you away from your own history, no. Write a simple sentence here in the comments. It can be, I know how it is. I understand you. Touch. It's true or just, I agree. Because there is pain that only those who feel it understand, and there is strength that only appears when everything else seems lost. I arrived at the court in advance. I entered alone, but I didn't feel alone. I carried with me the silence of many women who were once treated as weak, and they weren't. I sat in the front row, with my bag on my lap and my head held high. Wow. Kimberly and Ethan came on later. She wore a beige pantsuit, her hair tied up in a high bun. He, as always, was too much of a tie to disguise his arrogance. They looked at me with that same air of superiority, as if they had already won. But little did they know, because in that court, something was going to happen, something that would change everything. And the judge's reaction, no one expected this one. How? I remember the sound of my shoes on that marble floor. It was the same corridor where decades before, iron taste. I walked with piles of lawsuits in my arms, organizing courtrooms, writing down names, greeting lawyers who didn't even look at my face. Now, so many years later, I was back, not as an employee, not as a spectator. I came back as the main part of the story. Slow steps, yes, but firm. Each step said, "Oh, I'm alive. I have a name, and am here." Rudyard Siddenbaum. I wore the navy blue dress that accompanied me on the important days of the court. The fabric was no longer new, but fell on the body like armor. By my side, Leo, Discio Bardsa, Mark Bentley walked with the serenity of someone who knows the truth. Unlike me, he had already been through hundreds of rooms like that. But that day, he was not just any client's lawyer. He was the shield of a story that would no longer be silenced. When we entered the room, the silence was almost sacred. Kimberly was on the other side, with Ethan. She wore a beige suit that looked plastered, uncomfortable. He kept his chin up, numb, with an air of someone who had already won. But it was only when they saw me that something in them changed. Ethan widened his eyes for a second. Kimberly, Montow, out of reflex, adjusted the necklace around her neck. It was as if, suddenly, the figure they imagined they would find had been replaced by another. I wasn't the old woman cornered in a robe and slippers. I was Cheryl Anderson, and they were going to learn the difference. When the judge entered, the air in the room seemed to stop. He had a dark toga, a leather briefcase in his hand, and his glasses on the tip of his nose. He walked to the bench with the posture of someone who carries the weight of justice, but then saw me, and it stopped for an instant that seemed too long. He stood still, his eyes fixed on me, as if they had recognized a piece of their own youth. He took off his glasses slowly, as if to confirm. "This is Cheryl Anderson," he said. "Now, Narnissia Malcloud," his voice hesitating, and a twinkle in his eye that you don't see in court. I nodded, a restrained gesture. But there, no danger of a nod self-restraint. Everything had already changed. Matthew Lawson, himself. Arnie. Oh no. He was the skinny and shy intern who, in the 90s, stayed in my office making copies, writing down deadlines, asking me about the routine of the family court. I remember it as if it were today. He took a lunchbox from home, wore a crooked tie, and had immense respect for me. You are the heart of this court, he once told me. Now, which I've Sidian. And now, he was the one who judged my cause. Kimberly shifted on the bench, trying to understand what was happening. Ethan folded his arms, restless. The judge cleared his throat, looked at me again, and then at the papers in front of him. But his eyes didn't lie. Why? He knew exactly who I was, and that changed the tone of the room. Mark approached and handed over the documents. I just watched. It was not the time to speak. It was time to let the years of silence finally echo. Let's listen to the arguments, said the judge. Online will come, and they'll did hear or tuck them down, trying to resume protocol. But it was clear. The formality had already been crossed by the truth, and neither Kimberly nor Ethan seemed prepared for what was to come. Because the court, it does not forget the righteous, and justice. It has memory. Do you want to know what happened when my story started to be read aloud? Get ready, because what came next made their mask fall off, and it wasn't pretty. Judge Lawson adjusted his glasses and looked at me with an expression that was not only one of recognition, but of gratitude. Miss Cheryl Anderson, Liam, how do you say? He was the first person who believed me in this court, when I was just an intern, full of fear of making mistakes, even when it came to bugging a case. He didn't speak loudly, but he said enough, and enough for everyone to hear. Enough to make Ethan's shoulders stiffen like stone. Enough for Kimberly to stop staring at her phone and look up. She looked at me as if she were seeing, for the first time, the woman behind her mother. The room was silent for a moment. What? I literally said Chelsea time. The kind of silence that no one forces. The one that happens when the truth enters slowly and takes over. I continued to sit, without raising his voice, kneel down, without having to defend myself, because sometimes memory does it for you. And mine, in that courtroom, had roots too deep to be ignored. Mark Bentley stood up, with the calm of someone who does not need to prove anything. He began to expose the documents one by one. Your Excellency, we have here the original will, dated and registered, exclusively naming Cheryl Anderson as the legal heir to all of the late Walter Anderson's estate. He placed the paper on the bench. We also have bank statements of funds in MS. Anderson's name, only as well as property deeds, including the Mount Pleasant property and the building on Calhoun Street, which is currently leased to third parties, including the plaintiff's own daughter, Kimberly. No. Kimberly widened her eyes. He looked at Ethan with an expression I couldn't decipher at first. Surprise? Anger? Fear? Farsing? Mark continued. These documents were withheld from S. Anderson. In addition, we present evidence that the power of attorney presented by the couple was signed without consent, without the presence of witnesses and without any legal medical verification, which violates the basic principles of legality. The referee nodded. There no so after seriousness in the look. Now, he knew those principles like the back of his hand, and more than that, he knew me. I didn't need to say much. Anyone who has worked for years within a court knows character is more difficult to forge than signature. With each page mark put on the table, I felt as if a weight was coming off me. Not a relief. Exactly. It was more justice returning to the right place. I didn't want to see Kimberly destroyed. I just wanted her to stop trying to destroy what I built with so much love. I remembered so many mornings in that building. Me, in a skirt and pantyhose, carrying boxes of files, bringing coffee to hurried lawyers, delivering notes between rooms, correcting typos with red pencil. I remembered the time I defended an intern who everyone said would come to nothing, the same one who now wore a toga in front of me. I remembered when Walter came to pick me up after work with withered flowers from the market, saying that he didn't have time to look for better ones, but that the love was whole. So much was kept in silence, and now he was returning as a witness. No, we spend our lives thinking that no one sees, that everything we do in silence is lost. But no, quiet dignity has an echoing force. It takes time, but it echoes. And when he comes back, no one can shut up. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes, telling a story is more than venting. It is a way to keep alive a truth that cannot be buried. As Mark finished presenting the documents, the judge flipped through carefully. He took notes, cross-referenced the data, compared dates. His countenance was serious, but attentive, and there was something in his eyes, a respect that went beyond the function. It was as if he was, in some way, rewriting an invisible debt to history. Kimberly whispered something in Ethan's ear. He shook his head. No, visibly annoyed. No. For the first time, the two seemed to understand that the plan wasn't working, that the role of victim no longer belonged to me, and that the court. I was listening. But the hearing was not over yet, because the judge had a question, and when he opened his mouth to do it, even the air in the room seemed to hold his breath. Do you want to know what he asked? Just wait, because the answer, and it will change everything. The referee adjusted his toga, looked at me, then at Mark. Mr. Ligiano, Bentley. Oh, does the defense have any more evidence that you would like to present at this time? Mark replied, with that calm tone that I already knew well. Yes, Your Excellency. An audio recording. It was received anonymously and authenticated. We request permission to reproduce it. Ethan shifted on the bench. For the first time, I noticed a tension that he couldn't hide. Kimberly stood still, her eyes fixed on the table, as if she already knew what was coming. The judge authorized it with a nod. Mark pressed the button on the tape recorder. And the room fell silent. Ethan's voice filled the courtroom. Clear, 1-0. Cold, L. She's an obstacle now. Kimberly, an old and stubborn obstacle. As soon as this house leaves its name, we will solve everything. You just can't wait for this woman to die of old age to have what is ours anymore. Kimberly's breathing was the only thing I heard after the sentence. The recording continued with him laughing. Do you really think she understands what's going on? That house should have been ours a long time ago. And they're full of pity, defending a woman who should have been in an asylum for years. An icy silence took over the room, the kind of silence that comes not from doubt, but from shame. Ethan looked around, trying to compose his face. That was a joke, a moment of frustration. Everyone exaggerates when they're stressed, but his voice did not convince even himself. Judge Lawson, my own pow. Frowning, Mayons made a long note before looking up. No, Captain, Mr. Mantom, Ethan, Pow. The tone and content of this recording indicate not only disrespect, but a clear intent to benefit from Cheryl Anderson's alleged incapacity. Do you confirm that you said those words? Ethan hesitated. No. Maybe it was in a moment of anger, but I never meant to harm anyone. The judge continued with his gaze fixed on him. What about the financing in MS? Anderson's name? Was it also a moment of anger? Mark stepped forward. Your Excellency, no. Here we have Mr. Ethan's current vehicle financing agreement, signed as if it were by Cheryl Anderson. The signature is clearly forged. Ness Anderson has not driven in 10 years, and yet the debit fell into his fund account. Kimberly put her hand to her mouth. No. Ethan swallowed. The judge asked for the document. He read each line carefully. This is serious, he murmured. Oh, more to himself than to the room. I remained silent, but not out of weakness. It was as if every word said there confirmed what my silence had been trying to protect for years. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about truth, about respect, about the root of everything we build with love, and that someone tries to start with ambition. The judge looked at me again. Mrs. Anderson, do you wish to take the floor at this time? I took a deep breath. I looked at him, then at Kimberly. Not yet, he said. I added, let him listen a little more. Mark nodded with a faint smile. He knew. Praise you. The time to speak was yet to come, and when it came, I would be ready. Sometimes what hurts the most is not the betrayal itself. It's realizing that you've been put aside by someone you've carried on your lap. It is to have been forgotten by those you taught to walk. If you're still here with me, listening to this, is because what I have to tell you is not over yet. And sometimes it is in the end that the truth shows its most beautiful form. Ethan ran his hand over his face. Nervously, now, Kimberly began to look at her own feet. The posture was no longer one of attack. It was of someone who realizes that something is about to slip through his fingers. But there was still more, because there was another document in Mark's folder. And when he put it on the bench, Kimberly's face changed for good. Why? Do you want to know what was on that paper? Oh, then prepare the heart, because this time it wasn't Ethan who unmasked himself. It was her. I stood up when Judge Lawson gave me the floor. The hands did not tremble, but the heart. Ah, my heart beat with a dignity that I didn't even know still lived in me. I walked to the center of the room and stood there. I didn't look at Kimberly right away. I looked ahead. I took a deep breath. Your Excellency, my daughters didn't walk town. I didn't come here to beg for anything, nor explain it to me. Wow. I came to remember. Wow. And I ask permission to tell you how it all started. Vidwad Tuwa. And he sent up to will contact you. Because sometimes when we understand the origin of the pain, we stop feeding the silence. And then, I counted. Wow. I told him about Walter, the man who made me believe that love could be simple and whole. About how, in the 70s, being a court secretary was to carry the world on your back without the right to error and still smile. I told how I divided myself between hearings and sleepless nights, preparing school lunchboxes, embroidering names on uniforms. Holding back tears in front of Kimberly so as not to worry. I talked about the late nights taking care of Walter, while cancer consumed everything, except our union, and the times I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for my daughter's violin lessons. She played Clair de Lune with sweetness, and I listened as one who prays. I spoke of the last springs, of absence, of the forgotten dates, from the Thanksgiving turkey that never came out of the freezer, the wedding dress I found in a donation box, of the jewels that disappeared from the dresser. I didn't cry for them. I cried because I realized that nothing else had value. Neither did I. My voice did not rise at any time, but the silence around grew. And in the middle of my speech, I looked into my daughter's eyes. She had tears held up. Now, Ethan clenched his jaw. Feigning inference. I should have but she was falling apart in silence, as I have done so many times. For many years, I was a presence that did not weigh me down. Who cared? Who offered? Who waited at the gate? When they asked me for the house, I didn't refuse right away. I just asked, why? And I received no response. Only documents, only impatient looks, only phrases like, it's the best for you, like I wasn't anymore. People, as if I had turned an old vase in a corner. I looked at the judge. Silence was my response when I was left aside. But justice, Your Honor, she has her own voice. And today, she is the one who speaks for me. How loud. That was it. And I went back to my place. Kimberly tried to stand her ground, but when I sat down, it collapsed. His face hid between his hands. Ethan tried to touch her on the arm. No, but she pulled away. He mumbled something that no one understood. Maybe not even her. The referee asked for a 10-minute break. Mark looked at me with respect, and for the first time, I felt that the silence that surrounded me was no longer that of abandonment. It was that of impact, of what is said with truth and that no one can unsay. No, some memories accompany us throughout our lives, and no matter how much time passes, or how many possessions are taken from us, there are memories that remain like tattoos on the soul, and they are the ones who sustain us when everything seems to fall apart. If you keep any memory like this with you, a song, a smell, a look, a phrase that marked you, tell me in the comments. Or if you've experienced something similar, now, or even heard someone go through it, leaves it on record, because shared memory is also healing. The pause was over, and the referee came back with the same serious face. But now, Booze, with different eyes. Ethan whispered to the lawyer, trying to regain control. But there, control had already slipped, because after my speech, Kimberly was no longer the same. And when she got up, what she said surprised even the judge. Want to know what it was? Get ready, because here comes a truth that no one in that room expected to hear. When Kimberly stood up in that room, I barely recognized the woman who stood. The shoulders no longer carried arrogance, and the voice, once so practical and sharp, "Please you," came out choked, as someone who carries a guilt that still does not know where to place. She did not just speak, but the judge allowed it. And it was there that I heard my daughter for the first time in many years. Not the cold woman shaped by convenience, but the girl I cradled on feverish nights. I didn't know I was losing my mother, little by little, she said. Oh, the truth is, I let the noise of my life drown out everything that mattered. Ethan frowned, but she didn't even look at him. He was looking at me. There is no justification. He is only ashamed, and pain. The referee did not comment. He just waved and asked her to sit down. Then he got up, and it was as if the whole courtroom changed temperature. His voice, now, hot is out and so firm, nay, now carried something else. Purpose. This court not only immediately revokes any interdiction or legal representation proceeding made without Cheryl Anderson's legitimate consent, but also orders a stay of any attempted sale, assignment, or movement of assets on her behalf. Mark Bentley nodded with a faint smile. Ethan paled me. He looked at the lawyer as if looking for a way out. But there was no escape. The judge continued, I also request the opening of an investigation into the misuse of documents, false signatures, and suspicious bank transactions involving Ethan Thomas and any co-author, with the support of the financial and legal department of this court. That's when I felt a weight shift inside me. And it was not relief. It was justice taking shape, rising slowly like a long fallen column. And the most impressive thing is that there was no need to shout. My voice, which for years was silent, was heard not because I forced it, Oh, but because it carried truth, Lawson didn't end there. He made a point of looking at me when he said, Mess. Cheryl Anderson has worked on this court for nearly 3 decades. And I know, personally, me, what it represents. When I was an insecure and inexperienced boy, she treated me with dignity. She believed in me when I still didn't. Today, it's my turn to give back. And I don't reciprocate with favors. I reciprocate with respect. The room fell silent. No. Ethan pressed his fingers together nervously. The judge ordered a new session with representatives of the public prosecutor's office and legal experts. This case deserves full attention because if we allow silence to be treated as weakness, we are denying the very role of justice. I didn't say anything. I just closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered my first week at court. In 1979, I was afraid of everything. Fear of making a mistake with the stamp, of filing the name in the wrong place, of not being seen. But Walter said, "How? You don't need to prove that you are strong. You just have to keep being." And that's what I've done for all these years. I continued to be, even when they turned off the light, even when they pulled the rug out from under them, even when they called my house a burden and my life an obstacle. I can't describe what I felt at that moment, but if I could give a name, maybe it would be wholeness, as if all the parts that had been torn out, forgotten, silenced, to return to the place. One I won. I am the one. Take it easy, without fuss. The judge hit the gavel. Lol. Sitting closed. Now, Ethan got up first, in a hurry, as if trying to flee a scene. But Kimberly remained seated. Wow. The red eyes, the breath held. He looked at me, and he said nothing. But this time, on. He didn't have to, because her silence was no longer one of contempt. It was one of regret, and maybe of nostalgia. Still, something in me said that this story was not over, because when justice begins to act, it doesn't stop at the surface. And what the judge was preparing for the next hearing. No one imagined that. 2 days after the hearing, the paperwork was in order. Mark took care of everything with surgical precision. He knew that at this point in my life, I didn't want any more wars, only justice. The official notification was delivered directly into Ethan's hands. 30 days to vacate the property where he and Kimberly lived. The building was mine, acquired by Walter decades ago, and never mentioned by me. I never needed it. But now, he needed to. Not out of revenge. By repair. Ethan received the envelope and, as expected, went on a rampage. He called right away. The voice on the other end of the line was different. It wasn't the cold, calculating man who smiled condescendingly at family gatherings. It was a cornered animal. You can't do that to me. This is abuse. I'm going to sue you. Cheryl, I'll say you're going to regret messing with me. I took a deep breath and said with all the serenity I could, Ethan, I don't need to ask for respect anymore. Now it comes with a signature and stamp, wife, and there is a real date. and I hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. Kimberly showed up at my door that same night. There was no suitcase, just a plastic bag and her eyes downcast. He didn't ask for anything. He only asked, "Well, can I stay here for a while?" I nodded. "No, not did he so went out." The house was silent, but not the same as before. It was a different silence, not abandonment, but of the new beginning. Nah. She slept in her old room. Nah. With light furniture, the lamp with hand-painted flowers, the pink carpet faded by time, the nursery on the pipestone, worn by the Tua, were still there. In the morning, I did wash. He went downstairs to the cafe and, for the first time in many years, washed his own cup. "Nee," she said, "thank you," and remained silent. But this time, her silence seemed regretful. Oh, Ethan, on the other hand, did not give up. He tried to file a complaint, threatened to sue me, called acquaintances in the real estate sector, sought lawyers, but there was no loophole. All the movements he had made with my name, loans, powers of attorney, none, attempted sale, were under investigation. The prosecutor's office had already opened a procedure, and when he found out about it, he tried to turn the tables on him. I still knew unsubstantiated or him, claiming that he had been manipulated by Kimberly. But the documents, the signed papers, they were all with him. No. Mark called me 3 days later, with the calm voice of someone who brings good news. "Cheryl, Nancy held, and had no cover to chat. Nasitroki stood here well, has surrounded. No, when it came, and the weapon tonad, and the search of you. Everything that needed to come to light came. Now it's a matter of time. And I heard that with relief, but without euphoria, because sometimes true justice is not tasteful. It gives peace. Ethan's fall was not as I imagined. There was no public humiliation, no shouting, no scandals. There was only the law, the truth, and the inevitable weight of the choices he himself made. Kimberly avoided bringing it up. He spent his days helping me in the garden, trying to look me in the eye, but still, without the courage to say what he needed. I didn't charge. I just watched. After all, sometimes the one who hurts the most is also the one who makes the most mistakes. And perhaps she was still waking up from the illusion in which she had lived for so long. On the other hand, felt whole again. Sonibia, I kakastos, not because he won, but for remembering who I was. Every tea served in silence, every prayer made in solitude, every flower watered with affection, while the world ignored me. All that made sense now. I wasn't erased. Long. I was on hold. Nearly. And then, one blue afternoon, as we were gathering dry leaves from the yard, Kimberly finally spoke. "Mom, I let him do the thinking for me, and I stopped thinking about you." Is that it? One sentence, but that opened a window inside me, and through that window, Light entered. Well, I didn't answer with words. I just touched her hand lightly. Ah, it was too early for forgiveness, but too late to follow as if nothing had happened. So we stayed there, just breathing and living. But little did we know that the case would bring yet another surprise, because the next day, wow, I received a brown envelope, and when I opened it, my world has turned once again. The envelope arrived on a windy morning. It was on the floor of the porch, next to the dry leaves that always accumulate in the corners of the house when April begins to say goodbye. I took it carefully. Once, there was no sender. It was thick, brown, with no marks other than my handwritten name, in firm handwriting. We stare. Inside, now, I found the original certificates of my mother's jewelry, the ones that had disappeared months earlier, when Kimberly started packing everything up without consulting me. Next to the papers, a small folded sheet with familiar handwriting. No, Town. I kept it out of fear, but am giving it back out of respect. Sorry. How? Mom, it was my daughter's handwriting. At that moment, I didn't cry. I couldn't. Maida. Because sometimes, when the heart takes too long to be beaten, it doesn't respond immediately to the affection. But I kept the ticket, and with him, I also kept a new thread of hope, one of those that cannot be seen, but that warm inside. Kimberly returned with only one suitcase, one of those old ones, navy blue, wide and not calm, half unstitched in the corner. It entered slowly. He didn't ask for space. He offered silence, and I, who had already made the house a temple of remembrance, allowed her to occupy one of the empty rooms, not as a repentant daughter, would count, but as a broken woman seeking to retrace the pieces. In the first few days, we hardly exchanged words. She washed the dishes carefully. He collected the clothes from the clothesline before I asked. I prepared my coffee the way I like it, strong, unsweetened. I was writing down in a white mug. There. He began to sweep the garden, cut the azaleas, clean the attic. Now, but it was not an obligation. It was something else, a kind of calm penance, like someone who tries, slowly, to ask for forgiveness without opening his mouth. I watched, not to charge, nor to judge, but because it still hurt, and forgiveness. My daughter, niece, forgiveness is a long road. It doesn't happen with an excuse. It is born when we see change, and even so, it still needs time to flourish. On a sunny afternoon, I found Kimberly sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by the cardboard boxes ID kept since Walter's death. He had an open envelope on his lap, one of the letters he wrote to me in the early years of their marriage. I still remember every word of that letter, because Walter had this gift of writing as someone who embraces. She read in silence, with teary eyes, when she saw me at the door. How? She couldn't hide her tears, and I also didn't pretend I didn't see it. I just stood there, quiet. None. I didn't hug it, but I didn't move away either, because some pains need to be felt whole before they become healing. That night, for the first time in years, she asked me, "No, Mom, Mom, do you want me to read you his letters?" I said yes. We sat on the couch, the same one where Walter played the guitar, and she started. Her voice was low, almost childlike, and as I read, oh, I realized that something was changing in both of us. It was not just reconciliation, it was a reconnection with what we were before everything was lost in the noise of the world. The days went by like this, in silence and gestures. She started cooking my old recipes, asked how I liked the table set, cleaned the shelf the way I always did. One day, he even tidied up the broom closet, something that even I didn't do properly. It was not perfection. It was an attempt, and I began to realize that, despite everything, there was still time. You know, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. If you're here, Moon, listening to this piece of my life, like this video and subscribe. Let's make this story reach those who need to remember that not all pain is an end. Sometimes it's just the middle of a new beginning that we still don't understand. That spring, the garden bloomed more brightly again. With you so, the daisies opened early, and the camellias, wow, and the camellias, which had always been stubborn, loomed together. It seemed like a sign. Well, or maybe it was just nature being generous, as it always was with me, even when I no longer had faith in tomorrow. But the court's envelope was yet to arrive, and when he arrived, I brought a name that no one expected to see written, the name that was missing for the truth to be completed. And what came next? I still get goosebumps just remembering it. The envelope bore the seal of the registry office and a letter of thanks from Judge Lawson. But, next to it, there was another document, unexpected, a formal suggestion for the registration of a charitable foundation, encouraged by himself, with full legal support and tax incentive. When I finished reading, I left the paper on the table and looked at the backyard. The azaleas were beginning to bloom again. It was as if something called me to continue, but now, no longer for me, by others like me, by women who, now, like me, were silenced, now, pushed to a corner of the room, treated as a burden, as a problem. I thought about how many of them had stories without a voice, how many stayed in cold rooms waiting for calls that never came. Why did you own so? How many have cried in the dark after years of caring for others? It was time to make that pain root. I called Kimberly into the room. I showed her the document, and she just nodded with teary eyes. That's what I want to live for now, daughter, she said firmly. Not to keep remembering what they took from me, but to give back what so many still don't even know they have. The right to be respected. That was the idea of root and grace. Root and grace. The name came from an old phrase from my husband, Walter. The ideas. You are my root. Cheryl, but it never lost its grace. I kept this phrase for decades, as if holding an invisible heritage, and now it was going to flourish in the world. With part the value of the fund that I discovered in the documents left by Walter. We opened the project. We started small, an office in downtown Charleston, next to the laundry room where all the ladies met to chat. We set up a space for listening, free legal support, and, with the help of a group of volunteer lawyers, including Mark, we offer guidance to elderly women in situations of abandonment, abuse, loneliness. Some no longer had families. Others had children who treated them like weight. Many just wanted to be heard. And I knew how to listen. Kimberly helped me behind the scenes. She took care of the papers, the phone calls, the coffee for the meetings. She was not an assistant. He was someone learning to serve with humility. In one of the first weeks, she herself attended to a lady named Gloria, 76 years old, left alone by her grandchildren, with a notice on the note, "Why, hi, I'll be back at the end of the month." They did not return. Kimberly sat with her for hours, and when Gloria left, she left a flower on the counter with a note. "Ruth and Grace, oh, thank you for reminding me of who I am." When I read it, why did he? Walker and Psalm. When I read it, I had to leave the room. I was more moved than I should have. News of the foundation rushed through the city like water on cracked earth. Some neighbors, who used to barely greet me, now stopped on my balcony to ask how to ask for help from a friend, an aunt, a distant neighbor. Oh, those who called me the forgotten old woman of King Street now came with respect in their eyes. But I haven't changed. I kept sweeping the sidewalk at dawn, pouring my coffee in the same white mug, listening to the birds on the same wooden bench where Walter used to sit. One day, as I was leaving the bakery, I was approached by a girl in her early 30s. "Are you Cheryl Anderson?" he asked. I said, "Yes." She held out her hand to me, said, "You saved my mother without even knowing her." That pierced me like a calm thunderbolt, because sometimes the justice that we do in silence echoes where we didn't even imagine. And it was on that day that I understood. The story I lived was not only mine, it belonged to all of them who were once silenced, and now, we're beginning to speak. If you've come this far with me, listening to every bit of this road, modern calm, I can only say one thing. There are moments in life when we think it's over, that no way to flourish anymore. But it is there, right there, where the root begins to take hold. What's next? It is the deepest piece of history. Stay with me. You will still see what happens when grace joins with courage. Because at the next hearing, it was Kimberly who asked to speak, and what she said, no one expected it. It was on an ordinary afternoon, one of those when the sun enters through the window lazily, that I found the letter. I was rummaging through one of the old boxes, looking for some documents from the foundation, when I accidentally opened a thick book of jurisprudence that belonged to Walter. It was a heavy volume, bound with a red cover, newspaper, which was always on the highest shelf in the office. As I flipped through it, a yellowish leaf slipped and fell into my lap. It was folded carefully, now, with my name written on the outside, the way he used to do when he wanted to surprise me. Cheryl, stop when the pain seems greater than the memory. I read that and my heart stopped for a moment. I opened it slowly, already smelling the old smell of the ink and paper. His handwriting was there, intact, steadfast, recognizable as the touch of his hand on my shoulder. If they ever hurt you, remember that the love you gave was never wasted. He will come back, not like before, but how you need it. My whole body was filled with a different silence, one of those that don't hurt, but welcome. Walter always had this gift, to reach me even when I was no longer here. He was still present, not in the portraits, but between the lines, in the small memories. And now, new. In that letter, I continued reading. He talked about life, about the house, about me. He said he knew I was stronger than he thought, that the world could be cruel. Yes, but that I had something rare, a calm faith, on zero, understanding, Hopkins, a courage without noise. And he ended with a phrase that still echoes within me today. If one day the world turns its back on you, let my memory embrace you from behind. I closed the letter and cried. My, but it wasn't crying of nostalgia. It was a cry of gratitude for the life we live, for the protection he left, for the trust he planted in me, sowing love, even after the match. That same day, one day, I took the envelope where I kept the Root and Grace statute and put Walter's letter inside. Together, nan artis, the two things made sense. One was the past, blessing me. The other, the future, opening up. One was Root, now. The other, gain, Grace. It was as if he had always known that I would need that strength now. And it wasn't money he had left me. No, it was something much more valuable. Structure, love, in the form of defense, preparation, in the form of silence, and the certainty that, even alone, I was armed with everything that mattered. The next day, one note, I went to the Foundation's office and left the envelope locked in the main drawer. I stayed there for a while, just looking out the window. Charleston was, as it always was, the same brick streets, the same church bells ringing at 6, the same sound of boats in the distance. But something inside me had changed, and it was beautiful to feel that, not as someone who won a war, but as someone who survived with dignity intact. You know, sometimes we think that getting old is just losing things, but there are things that only time delivers. Clarity, for example, nation patrician. We begin to understand the value of what we have built, even if others have tried to erase it. I lost a lot. My husband, my daughter for a while, my house almost, but I gained a sense of purpose that I never imagined I had. It was not revenge. It was justice. And it wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. And maybe you who are listening to me now have felt it too. This moment when the past no longer hurts like a wound, but pulsates like a healed scar. If this is your case, if any memory inside also sustained you in silence, stay with me. What I don't know, I'd become so calm, because what comes now in this story will show you that even the darkest chapters have light stored in some corner. And speaking of light, at the next hearing, it was Kimberly who asked to speak, and what she said, now, everything changed. The ceremonial girl called me by my full name, Cheryl Anderson. With that muffled microphone that echoes in the room and in people's ears like a racing heartbeat, we invite Root and Grace founder Cheryl Anderson to the stage to receive this honor for her contributions to the dignity of our city's women. I stood still for a second. The stage light didn't appeal to me. The eyes all turned to me did not miss me. But I got up, not out of vanity, but out of respect for the other women who were there, and those who could no longer be. My steps were slow but steady. He wore an old beige coat, the kind Walter loved, and worn shoes that knew the ways of life better than I did. Kimberly looked at me from the audience with wet eyes. He didn't try to film. Not a boy say, nasty what called. He didn't smile widely. He just put his hand on his chest, as if silently thanking for something that took him a long time to understand. I went on stage and said nothing. Nothing. The organizer made the speech. He spoke of numbers, of women served, of cases reversed, now, of homes rebuilt. But what struck me was the last sentence. Sometimes the most powerful person in town is the one who has been silent for decades. I heard that and felt a lump in my throat, not out of pride, but by repair, knowing that the dignity that was taken away from me was now being returned without fanfare. Justice. Lawson was seated in the front row. He got up slowly, came to me after it was all over. He shook my hand with his two, as if sealing a paid debt. You taught me twice. One, when no one saw it, me, and now, when everyone needed to see it. I smiled. That kind of small smile that only those who have lived a lot know how to give. He said nothing. I just made a slight wave and went back to my chair. I stayed there for a while longer, greeting some women, listening to short and long stories in the same embrace. But soon after I said goodbye. I said goodbye. I returned home as I always do, through the quiet streets of Charleston. No, with my purse tight on my arm and my head full of old and new thoughts. I arrived, put the kettle on the fire, took off my shoes, and went to water the azaleas. They were more open that week, more vivid, and more full of color. Maybe because they felt that some part of my soul was lighter too. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't open the newspaper. I didn't tell anyone. Fame has never served me as a home. What really suits me is silence. That silence that accompanied me in the hardest dawns, in the forgotten Sundays, in birthdays without congratulations, That silence that doesn't ask for a stage, but that now, noise, ironically, Nays had won. Yes, as I watered the plants, I heard the front door open slowly. Kimberly, well, I'd to see ya. She came in, took off her coat, and stood in the kitchen. "Ha, mother, no," he said, in a low voice. I turned around. "You looked beautiful up there." I didn't answer. No. I just finished watering the last flower, turned off the kettle, and poured 2 cups of tea. We sit at the table. She was fiddling with a little wooden box. He took out an envelope. I found this in his old albums, along with some letters from Dad. He pushed the paper to me. "Well, you can open it." And I opened it. It was a photo from us, me, her, and Walter Lees, sitting on the steps of the old house on a late autumn afternoon. Me holding a cup. I'd seen or did I watch Tear sad. Her with her knees scraped, and Walter laughing, with his arm around both of us. I held that photo like someone holding a time that doesn't come back. And I thought, how much do we lose while trying to prove that it is worth staying? But sometimes, life finds a way to give back. If I tell you that at that moment I understood everything, it would be a lie. But I felt it. I felt that a piece was missing for this puzzle that I have become, and she is about to appear. Because that night, while I was washing the cups and putting the photo in the envelope, Kimberly approached and said, "Oh, Mom, hey, Najad, I wanted to tell. There's something you don't know yet." Serenity slept soundly in the stroller, with her little hands closed and her face serene, as if she still didn't know the weight of the world. Kimberly knelt before Walter's tombstone and laid fresh flowers, daisies and carnations, as he liked. Then he sat next to me on the stone bench, saying nothing for a while. The silence between us was no longer a barrier. It was rest. When she finally spoke, the words came soft, as if they had waited decades to graduate. "It took me a while to see everything you were for me, Mom. But now, noise hard found. Everything I do, it's to honor that." I didn't cry. I just reached out and held hers. As I did so many times when she was little and afraid of the dark. Forgiveness was not an event, it was a process. It arrived as the light of a gray morning arrives, slowly but steadily. And that Sunday morning, there in that quiet cemetery in Charleston, I felt like the cycle was complete. Back at my house, no. I prepared my tea as usual. I used my old mug, the one with a crack on the side that insists on resisting the years, just like me. The garden was more alive. The sound of the birds seemed more present. The house, once empty and apparent, now had voices. Kimberly was reading on the couch, while Serenity was snoring in the crib in the corner. The Root and Grace Foundation was still going strong. 2 new residents had arrived that week, women who, like me, were treated as disposable, but who were rediscovering their roots and their grace. I sat on the porch with a sheet of paper in my hand. I wrote letters to them, a small welcome with stories, advice, and faith. The last sentence I wrote, without thinking too much, was also my most recent truth. I was betrayed. I was forgotten. Now, how? But in the end, I was remembered for what really mattered. If there's one thing this life has taught me, it's that we can lose almost everything, minus our essence. Time may take youth, people may turn their backs, love may change shape, but what we plant with truth flourishes. Wow. Even if it takes time, even if only after we stop waiting, the silence that once hurt me, no one, today shelters me, and every wrinkle I carry on my face is not a mark of pain. It is a medal of endurance. Now, if you've listened to me this far, I know just out there. This already consoles me. Wow. Sharing this story was not easy, but I believe that sometimes we count not only to relieve our own soul, but to hug someone's on the other side. Now, so, if this story touched your heart, leave a like here. It's like a silent hug that warms and supports this channel. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, sign up here. There's always one more story waiting for us. Also, comment there which city you are watching from. I like to imagine the corners of the world where this voice has reached, and it activates the bell. Okay? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. And if you think that was my last story, don't be fooled. Because sometimes what comes after the end, it's just the beginning of another new beginning. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.